Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, I want to review a couple of housekeeping items. Your lines are muted. However, if you have any comments or questions, you can submit those via the chat bar at any time throughout the webinar. Finally, we'll hold a Q&A at the end of the presentation. Great, so for today's webinar, Financial Wellness in the Workplace, you'll get insights on how employees view the concept of financial wellness, what they value, the impact to employers of a financially unwell workforce, and ultimately what employers can do to address the growing demand for financial wellness offering. Before we dig into the content, I'd like to introduce the presenters for today's webinar. I'm Thomas Horton, and I manage the team here at Benefitfocus responsible for distribution of our Benefits Place specialty partners, of which there are several that address the financial needs of employees and consumers. Joining me today is David Stedman, founder and CEO of BrightDime, one of our Benefits Place partners. David, thank you for joining me today. Can you give us a quick overview of your background?
Absolutely, Thomas. Thank you for having me. We certainly appreciate everything that Benefitfocus is doing in the wellness world, and in this case, particularly financial wellness. So I think it's important for everybody to kind of understand a little bit about my background and how BrightDime got started. My background is not in the benefits world. I actually started my career on Wall Street. I was in New York with Goldman Sachs, in London with Barclays Capital. I founded and ran a hedge fund for 12 years. And over that 20-odd year period, I realized that the people that needed the help the most, they needed the resources, the tools, the coaching, the advising, were the very people that did not have access to it. So I took a very big step to addressing that, and I closed the hedge fund and started BrightDime, and this was about 5 years ago. Since then, we've seen lots of changes in the industry, and BrightDime, we think and hope, is one of the best in the industry at helping employees. And so it's great to be here today, and thank you for having me.
Great. Appreciate that, David. So before we hop into financial wellness, let me briefly tell you a little bit about Benefitfocus. Founded in 2000, we're the largest publicly traded company that's purely focused on benefits management in the United States. Our platform supports more than 20 million consumers with more than 150,000 employers of all sizes that either partner with us directly or through one of our carrier partner relationships. So financial wellness. Financial wellness can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, so I think that it's important that we try and define it, at least in broad terms. And in order to do that, let's start by taking a look at what employees are telling us about their view of financial wellness. So employees continue to give great insight into their view of this topic, and on this slide you can see the top 6 most popular responses. It ranges anywhere from not being stressed out about finances to being retirement ready. I think personally what's interesting about the top response, not being stressed, is that all of the other 5 responses or criteria are factors that go into creating stress. So I think if we realize that, we can start to refine our definition of being financially fit to mean not being stressed. David, what are you and your financial coaches at BrightDime hearing from employees about their financial well-being and what they kind of list as concerns of theirs?
Okay, so first of all, I think this list is great, and I think your point about getting people to the point where they're not feeling stressed is super important. The question we initially get almost always from our employees and the people we help is, am I okay? And that means they're concerned about something. People want someone to check out their financial situation and find potential holes in their financial life. And in the end, people just want a plan. They want to be on the right path to make sure that they're going to be okay. So what we usually start with at BrightDime is creating a budget and an emergency fund. And those are sort of the first steps in addressing most of these needs that you see on the screen here.
Great. Now that's really good insight. Okay, so let's dive a bit deeper and evaluate what it means to be financially fit according to different generations, since we know there's multiple generations that span today's workforce. You can see from this graphic here that millennials value being debt-free above all else, while baby boomers on the other end of the spectrum, they say that having enough money in their savings to deal with an unexpected expense is what they find to be most important. I think what this illustrates is that being financially fit means different things at different points in a person's life. So employers, if you're thinking about it and you have a diverse workforce spanning multiple generations, you need to have a solution that addresses the needs and wants of people across the age spectrum. David, I wanted to get your thoughts on the baby boomer response in particular, because we're seeing a lot of employees are borrowing from their 401k to deal with unexpected expenses because they're not financially prepared. What are you seeing, and how do you view this as impacting someone's ability to be retirement ready?
Well, the obvious answer is it certainly affects their ability to become retirement ready. We try to find other ways that people can fund their lifestyle or fund their if they have problems, to fund those problems outside of borrowing against the 401k. But to answer your question directly, it is becoming a bigger and bigger problem lately, which seems odd given the economic conditions of the United States and the unemployment rate. I think people are learning that they can do it, and it's starting to spread a bit. And I'll give you one example. We have an employer that hired us. We're a holistic financial wellness solution, and they hired us for that. But their primary form of measuring our success is measuring how many people or if we can reduce the rate of borrowing against the 401k. This particular employer has mandatory 401k participation, and they care about their employees. They want to make sure they were retirement ready. At some point along the way, somebody found out you could borrow against the 401k, and it spread like wildfire. So they're bringing us in to mitigate that. The other thing to think about with the United States generally is it's a consumption society, and so people get in this mindset that they want a certain lifestyle, and they're willing to borrow against their future to maintain that lifestyle. So a lot of this is trying to change people's mindsets as well. Thomas, if you don't mind, I also want to address one other item in this slide, and it's the millennials. In studies we've done, we've seen very similar things that more than a quarter say it being debt-free is their primary goal, and that's great, and we find that is absolutely true. The problem is they don't know where to start. So the millennials oftentimes have student loan debt, credit card debt, mortgages, car payments. They don't know what of all their choices of debt, they don't know where to start and which one to pay off first, and often don't know what interest rate they're paying on their debt. So it's important that those millennials actually have a plan for their liabilities. And once you can get them that plan, then that stress we keep referring to starts to go down, and they can continue to pay off that debt over time.
No, I think that's a really good point. With multiple sources of debt, it can be overwhelming. So having access to coaching or advice, I think, is critical to to being financially fit. Okay, so moving on from what employees report as most important to them, let's take a brief look at the reality of the situation. So we know from everything that we've learned from surveys and just from looking at the data that financial stress does not discriminate based on age, gender, salary, or really anything else you can think of. It impacts everyone in some way. What we see, though, is that the source of that stress changes. For example, I think it's a common misconception that individuals with higher salaries are immune to feeling financial stress. The reality of the situation is they're simply stressed out about different things. David, in Bright Dime's dealings with employees, what types of stressors are you seeing from individuals with higher salaries versus lower salaries?
Great question, Thomas. I also want to reiterate, everybody has financial stress. I can promise everybody on this call has financial stress at some point in their lives, and usually consistently throughout their life. Now, when we talk about different sort of salary classes, let's start with sort of the low-wage earners. Their stress levels are very different. Their stress is about paying their bills, putting food on their table. That is where their stress is, and how they can save money to do that and just live. The middle class, Their stress is coming from more, how am I going to pay for my kids' college? They're starting to think about, how am I going to retire, if ever? And then in the upper class, I'm sure people don't have a tremendous amount of sympathy there, but they do have stress. The stress is, how am I going to maintain this lifestyle? Am I investing intelligently? Am I going to be able to retire when I want to and, again, continue this lifestyle? So reiterating what Thomas said, everybody does have financial stress. It's just important to meet the people where they are with their particular form of stress.
I couldn't agree with that more. It's meeting people in the moments that matter, that has a solution that's going to fit their personal needs. So that's.
Yep.
I'm glad you called that out, David. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into the reality of the current situations and look at three of the top stress-inducing issues. We've got student loan debt, which we know is huge, caregiving needs, and the savings crisis, which kind of goes back to the point earlier about what baby boomers find to be most important is their ability to pay for an unexpected expense. So we know that a long-standing barometer, if you want to say, of financial security is an employee's preparedness for retirement. And we also know that the circumstances listed here on this screen are potentially preventing them from preparing adequately for retirement. So student loan debt is a great example. It's higher than it's ever been. I think we all know that it's surpassed $1.5 trillion, and it's the second highest source of debt in America, right behind home mortgages. But what we have to do is take a step further and realize, what is this debt doing? It's delaying an employee's ability to do things like starting to contribute to their 401k. And if you're not preparing for your future now, then it's just going to become more and more difficult the closer to retirement that you get. 43% of employees with student loan debt have less than $50,000 for retirement. So, and on top of that, we know we're also living what we like to call the sandwich generation, which means that a large segment of the workforce is either financially responsible for their children, their parents, or in some cases both. So that not only impacts their ability to save, but we're also seeing that in many cases they're being forced to, again, borrow from their retirement funds to deal with today's expenses, which is a recipe for not being retirement ready. David, anything you'd like to add here?
Let's talk a little bit about student loans. That is the hot topic in financial wellness these days. And it's getting a tremendous amount of press. The good news is there are a lot of players getting into the business of refinancing student loans. But the one caution that I want to put out there is that make sure that the players you're dealing with have been vetted, because there's the risk of predatory lending, and that could be tremendous reputation risk to the companies that are offering that to their employees. I know that Benefitfocus, the relationships they have with those companies, all of those have been vetted and have extremely good reputations. So that's one thing I just want to point out to be careful of. The other thing that I want to point out with student loan debt is that it's interesting that we find that people that have student loan debt also usually do not have any cash in their checking account and also have credit card debt or other forms of debt, most likely credit card debt. The reality is that refinancing that student loan debt is a good idea, but there are usually a couple other things like creating an emergency fund or rainy day fund first, and then potentially paying off that credit card debt first because it's higher interest rate debt. So again, it's important that there's somebody there for the employee to say, hey, the student loan debt I know is cumbersome, but let's look at your whole financial picture to make sure that this is the first step you want to take. The other comment, Thomas, that I wanted to quickly make is on caregiving needs. This is becoming a bigger and bigger topic because the baby boomers are getting to the point where they've retired and the kids are having to help take care of their parents. We have had multiple people come to Bright Dime and say, hey, I want to add my parents to the Bright Dime site so I can help them monitor their spending or manage their financial world. And I think that's just something that people need to be aware of. That's what's one of the up-and-coming important factors in financial wellness. And the last part is the savings crisis. This is actually somewhat unique to America. America is a consumption-driven society. But we at Brightdime, we're at least working every day to try to make sure that people are consuming at the point at which they can maintain it for their lifetime and still retire. And it's important that people are put in that mind frame.
No, a couple of really good points. I think it's a really good segue into our next slide, which is, okay, we've looked at it from an employee's point of view. Let's take a look at it from what it means to employers. So here you can see the top impacts of a financially stressed workforce to an employer. I think, not surprisingly, loss of productivity is leading the way to the top of the list. I think that's a relatively obvious side effect, but I think what kind of goes back to what you were saying a moment ago, and what sticks out to me is the higher healthcare cost. So we've talked about employees being forced to delay savings, whether that's because of student loan debt or, to your point, caregiving expenses. But what that manifests itself in is an aging population that's working longer and longer before they actually reach retirement. So I think if you connect the dots, an older workforce means more medical claims, which means higher healthcare costs for employers. So I don't think you can understate the impact of that. So David, I know when Brightdime is talking to employers, you're going through an effort to quantify the ROI, or return on investment, when a financial wellness solution is offered. Can you expand on what this process looks like, and then maybe give some insight into what you see the number one goal of employers is when they decide to offer a financial wellness solution?
Sure. So there's some studies out there that show that employers are offering financial wellness because it's the right thing to do, and that's great. And everybody loves that. But in the back of their mind, and oftentimes at the very front of their mind, is this a good return on my investment? Is the company going to be able to get this money back through productivity, higher productivity, and things like that? And so my background is a quant background, so it was important to me to make sure that we could quantify what we were doing for our employers. And so we put together actually an ROI paper that we can customize for each employer that shows, given your demographics, the employer, given the employer's demographics and all the assumptions that employer makes about itself, here's what we think we can give you as a return on investment, and show them in each of these items that you have on this slide, we quantify how much we can save with each of those items. The one that I think is important is one that you touched on, delayed retirement. No company is going to come out and say, hey, I want to get my people to retire. But the reality is most companies want their employees to retire by the time they're 65. Most employees want to retire when they're 65. But a lot of employees just can't. And so what we're trying to do is get them retirement ready. So if you can replace a 65-year-old retired employee with a 30-year-old employee, the cost of that employee goes down significantly. So there are a lot of ways to save money through financial wellness, but that is one that people don't talk much about.
No, great point. Great point. So just here's some statistics that basically support what we were talking about on the last slide. You can see 43% of financially stressed employees spend more than 3 hours a week at work dealing with their issues, so that just further proves that loss of productivity for employers is a real tangible issue caused by financial stress. I think what you can kind of deduce from this particular slide and what we just talked about is that studies are showing that financially stressed employees are more likely to leave a job for higher compensation. So an employer's ability to proactively address those issues will ultimately lead to greater talent retention and most likely attraction as well. So just some stats to back that up. Okay, so now we've established what a financially unfit workforce can mean to an employer. So let's take a look at what the employer's role in financial wellness can be. So I think when I look at this, I think what's interesting is that you take this stat, that stat being 50% of employees believe their employer has a responsibility for the financial well-being of their employees, and you couple that with what we're learning from other studies that show employees continue to indicate they want to make their own decisions in general, but especially relative to addressing their financial stress and well-being. But what they want is someone to validate those decisions. And that being said, when we look in the benefit space and we look at employer offerings, I think employers are in a really unique position to fill the role of that validator, since they are trusted by their employees. So by offering a solution, an employer is saying, this is a good option for you. They're validating that employee's decision. Okay, now here are what we see I think is very encouraging if you're an employer. So not only are employees saying they want financial wellness offerings from their employer, but when given the chance, they're actually participating in really good numbers. So I think if you're an employer and you're on the fence about whether you want to roll something out, this is really encouraging information. David, what's your biggest piece of advice for employers to consider when they're crafting or creating a financial wellness package?
So the biggest piece of advice I would give is to create a solution that is sustainable, sustainability. And I compare it oftentimes to my habit of losing 10 pounds and gaining it back again over and over again. If I lose 10 pounds and I gain it back, it really doesn't do me much good from a health wellness standpoint. But what I really need is a coach to tell me what's good things to eat, and also put me on a workout program. We do the same thing for financial wellness. It's important that that employee has a platform and a coach and a solution that can make financial wellness a lifestyle and not just a single event. So what often, what I would suggest is sort of the best solution is find a holistic financial wellness solution, and then mix in pinpoint solutions that fit your particular employee's needs.
That's a great point. It can't be something that's not sustainable, either from the employer's perspective or the employee. It's got to be an ongoing activity to make sure that you're remaining financially fit. That's a really good point, David. So this slide is simply to further the point that financial wellness is becoming an emphasis in the benefits space. You can see that employers are increasingly aligned around the idea that they have a responsibility for the financial well-being of their employees. I'm of the opinion, I believe this number is going to continue to grow as employers witness some of the benefits like improved employee retention and attraction. I think those two items are increasingly important in a place where we are today with low unemployment and people fighting for the same talent. And to add on to that last slide, again, noting that unemployment numbers are incredibly low right now. Employers are looking for ways to differentiate themselves from their competition, and employers are responding, with loyalty. So employees are reporting that if there are benefits that they're being offered that they are dependent on, they are less likely to leave their employer for another one, even if there's potentially a higher salary involved. So I don't think we can really overstate the importance of these total well-being strategies and benefits packages from employers. So now that we've talked about what financial wellness means to employees and employers, here's just a slide with some data supporting the implementation of a financial wellness offering. I think what's interesting to note is the alignment between employees and employers in certain areas versus the disparity in other data points. So, for example, we see pretty close alignment if you look at the category of minimizing stress. So clearly employees and employers agree that a benefit of financial wellness program is their ability to reduce stress. But on the other end of the spectrum, if we look at peace of mind, for example, we see a pretty large disparity in terms of how employees value that versus how employers do. So both parties agree there are benefits. They simply place the emphasis in what they value on different areas, which I think is pretty interesting. So we've established what financial wellness means. Let's talk about the solutions that exist to address those needs. So I think the biggest shift we've seen in wellness offerings over the years, and David, I want to get your take on this in a minute, is a shift from a passive approach to an active approach. Financial wellness offerings have traditionally, you could argue, been focused on education and financial literacy, but given what employees are experiencing today and given the unbridled access they have as consumers in their everyday lives, they're looking for action-oriented solutions. So they want to diagnose what the problem is that they're facing, and then they want to know exactly what action to take to fix it. So if you're an employer and you've decided, yes, I want to roll out a financial wellness offering, what now? What do I do? What do I need to consider? First and foremost, you need to evaluate your workforce and their needs. So understand the data you have at your disposal, how to analyze it in conjunction with a trusted advisor to identify what your workforce's greatest needs are. For example, if you know your company is experiencing unusually high volume of 401k loans, then you should think of two things. First, what can I do to eliminate or lower the number of loans being taken out? And secondly, why do my employees feel like they need to take these loans? I think for the first question, a good solution would be to provide an alternative, something like a low-interest emergency loan provider, something that's responsible, something that's not forcing them to borrow from their future and ultimately delay retirement. For the second component, like why do they need these loans? I think there's a number of ways you can approach this, but I think what we've seen be most successful is really just employee engagement. So work with your employees to solicit their feedback, whether that's employee advisory councils, one-on-one sessions with their management, anonymous surveys, whatever works best for your organization to understand what problems your employees are truly facing and how you can go about fixing that. For example, you might find that they're suffering from student loan debt, which we've touched on a couple of times as a huge hot-button issue right now, and then that can lead you to offer a refinancing component or even a student loan employer contribution tool to help them fight down that debt. So I think the most important thing to take away from that first point of evaluating your workforce needs is use everything at your disposal. Secondly, choices. So back to the consumer component of this. One way to think of financial wellness and the solutions made available by your offering is as a consumer. So consumers have different needs and wants when shopping in their everyday lives. So financial wellness can kind of mirror that experience in the sense that each employee has personalized needs, and those personalized needs require personal solutions. So a variety of offerings when putting together a financial wellness package is increasingly important. After that, you obviously need to make your employees aware of what it is you're doing as an employer, what you're offering them, what they have access to, and why it's of benefit. It's possible that they're experiencing some form of financial stress and they haven't even diagnosed it as such. So going through an awareness and education campaign when rolling out a new offering is critical. And then last, but certainly not least, is ongoing engagement. So this is key. David, I think you touched it on a little bit. Being financially fit is a journey. It's how you act and the things that you do over the course of your life that allow you to reach financial wellness and to maintain it. So an employer needs to keep engaging their employees, whether that's through monthly newsletters, a quarterly lunch and learn that you get all the employees in the room that want to participate, and you tell them, hey, this is what we're rolling out, or even something like a benefits fair where your financial wellness vendors are coming on site, engaging face-to-face with employees and telling them all of the great things that they have offered to them. So David, what changes would you say you're seeing in the financial wellness industry?
So first of all, all really good points that you made, especially when we talk about awareness and education and ongoing engagement. But when we talk about the change in the financial wellness industry, it's been substantial. Financial wellness over the past, I'd say 3 to 5 years, has been a super hot topic. But it's just been in the last year that we've seen corporations step up and take action and implement programs. 2018 was a great year for BrightDime. I think it was probably a great year for most financial wellness companies because companies are really stepping up and working with their employees to provide them the right types of solutions. So the first change is that all this talk is actually turning into action. The second change is that the way it's being delivered is changing substantially. Financial wellness traditionally were seminars, webinars, and what we found is that people will attend a seminar and a webinar, but they don't make a change because of it. They go back to their desk and they keep on doing what they're doing. So it's important. The big change that we've seen is that the solutions that are coming out now, and it's what we're trying to do at BrightDime, take a much more personalized approach, personalized coaching, targeted education that meets people, that educates people on where they need to be educated, live budgeting and goal setting and that kind of thing. All these things are things that personalize that user experience so that those last two items on this slide, awareness and education and ongoing engagement, becomes a lot more prolific. So I'm not a huge fan of seminars and webinars because they don't get employees to take an action. The third and last item that I'll tell you that we're seeing a big change in the industry is that the digital revolution is also coming to financial wellness. Employees and employers, for that matter, want a digital solution that the employees can access anywhere and at any time. A great example is we had, this was a couple months ago, but there was an employee that contacted his BrightDime coach, and he was about to buy a car. And so he got advice from the coach on the spot whether he should buy or lease that car. And the coach was able to do that for the employee because the coach could digitally see that user's financial situation and give him the appropriate advice. So anyway, it's those three things. It's growth, it's more personalized approach, and the onset of the digital revolution in financial wellness.
Great. I'm sure you love this webinar, though, right, David?
That's a great point, Thomas.
Okay, so just kind of further the point that we talked about variety and choices. I think it's important that employers take into consideration solutions that provide immediate short-term impact for the problems that employees are facing right now, today, as well as the long-term solutions that help them on that journey that we've talked about a few times. So I think a short-term example would be something like student loan refinancing that provides an immediate impact through additional savings that someone's going to have in their paycheck today. And a long-term option would be something like a college savings plan, so a 529 guidance or something along those lines where an employer knows when an employee is in that moment where they've had a newborn child, they've added them to medical. Well, let's take it a step further and say, hey, you also have this other offering that can help you prepare for your child's future education. So I think variety in terms of short-term and long-term solutions is really important. And this slide is reinforcing what we've talked about in terms of employees wanting more options for benefits that are not strictly medical benefits. So this really just talks and points to the fact that consumerism is having an impact on employer benefits. They being employees have access to everything they could imagine outside of work. Well, employer benefits should be the same. So let's talk about how Benefits Place can help. So the work done by our Benefits Place team has resulted in a catalog of products and services that fit needs across the financial wellness spectrum. These fully integrated solutions provide benefit-focused employers a single platform for whatever they determine to be their multifaceted holistic financial wellness solution that meets the needs of their diverse workforce. So everything within the confines of Benefitfocus Marketplace that your admins are already using today, your employees are already using today, everything can be seamlessly folded in. And as part of our strategic partnerships with Benefits Place partners, we've created standardized solutions that promote reduced implementation timelines and reduced administrative work. So really, Benefits Place has gone out and done the work to allow employers to make decisions and act quickly when curating or deciding to offer a new financial wellness package. This is an example of some of the partners that Benefits Place is working with today in the financial wellness space. Obviously, David, you there with BrightDime to take that holistic approach to understanding an employee's financial standing and their financial life, along with a number of other partners that, to my earlier point, fully integrated on the platform that provide the ability for an employer to have a well-balanced approach of holistic versus pinpoint solutions. And that's really the goal of Benefits Place.
Yeah, Thomas, let me throw one thing in on that slide. I think it's important that everybody knows that Benefitfocus is working with the best of the best, and I feel fortunate that BrightDime is part of this list, but each of these vendors have been vetted, and I know them well. BrightDime actually works with each one of these because we don't compete with any of these. We work with them so we can make referrals to them for the employee when it's appropriate. But I think it's important that the listeners know that who you're working with here, they're very reputable and great companies.
No, very good point. Very good point. So let's talk about some key takeaways. I think we identified some themes throughout the conversation that just naturally kind of surface themselves when you start to talk about financial wellness in the employer benefit space. But some of the key takeaways is financial stress, it impacts everyone. No one is immune from it. Everyone has some source of financial stress. On top of that, employees, they want guidance from their employers. They're continuing to say that in rising numbers, in overwhelming numbers, saying, I want more non-medical benefits offered to me, and specifically, I want things that are going to address my financial needs so I can be as financially fit as possible. And employers are going to benefit from rolling out these types of programs, whether that's increased productivity, increased presenteeism at work, equipping their workforce to retirement at the age that they're ready to retire. Employers are benefiting from rolling these packages out, and there's real tangible ROI that they can see. And last but not least, as financial wellness programs continue to evolve, what we're seeing is a shift away from simply being financially literate in education to action-oriented approach that helps you not only identify what your problem might be, but to fix it. I think that can't be understated enough, or can't be overstated enough. David, anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think that's a great list. I would stress really that last point, action-oriented approach coupled with ongoing engagement. We're constantly being asked about engagement and how are we measuring and changing employees' lives, and that's a huge component of this, I think.
Great. Thank you. So if there are any additional questions that come up that haven't been posed through the chat right now, please feel free to reach out to myself or David. This deck will be distributed to you through an email with a link to the recording as well as the deck. So if for any reason there's a question that comes up after the fact, please feel free to reach out to myself or David. We did have a couple of questions come in while we were on the line, so give me a moment. I'm going to address those. You mentioned ongoing engagement as part of your slide. Can you give us some further examples around that? Yeah, no, absolutely. So in my mind, I think we stated there's not one solution that's going to provide an immediate impact to take everyone from financially unwell to financially well overnight. It's ongoing behavior, it's ongoing habits. It is something that you practice over time, that being financial wellness. That being said, when employers roll something out, you need to continue to educate your workforce because their needs are not necessarily going to be tomorrow what they are today. So keeping them up to date on everything that you're offering, whether that's through, like I said, newsletters, lunch and learns, benefits fairs, keeping them involved to make sure that they are continuing to practice those good habits, they're going to lead to financial wellness. David, what would you like to add there?
Yeah, a couple things. One is I think it's important before you launch a program to create a marketing plan. And within that marketing plan, it's important that middle management buys into financial wellness. Because what we have learned is that if middle management is telling their direct reports to sign up for BrightDime, you're really going to enjoy BrightDime, and here's why. The engagement and the user, the percent engagement goes up tremendously. So create a marketing plan, but also make sure you get buy-in from middle management. The other thing that we've had some interesting success on are unique incentive programs. I think incentive programs are great overall, but one example is that a company is talking about having, when their employee participates in a coaching session, they'll then have the opportunity to win an iPhone or an Apple Watch, and it's kind of the lottery concept. Their name gets put in a hat, and they give away an Apple Watch or an iPhone every month. So it's a way to incent people to get involved. And the last thing I'll say is make sure that the vendor that you're engaged with offers a personalized user experience so the employee is motivated to continue to check in over time, and that's a theme we've been talking about a lot. And so, make sure that there are certain ways that the employee continues to hear about your vendor, whether it's emails, videos, and yes, I'll say webinars and seminars. And I made the joke about that earlier. I think it's fine to have webinars and seminars so people hear about the program. It's the user experience needs to be personalized so they continue to participate in it.
Good point. Good point. Okay, next question. What are some engagement metrics an employer like me could expect to receive from a vendor? I would like to know what kind of stats I could present to my team at an executive level. David, I will defer to you first on that one.
Sure. So we provide the vendors with various statistics on activity, from monthly participation to number of coaching sessions to goals set, goals completed, progress on goals. It's important that the employer communicates to the vendor what's important to them, and hopefully the vendor is flexible enough to be able to provide statistics on that. Because we have so much data, we're able to be somewhat flexible on what kind of statistics we can provide. The second thing is I think it's a good idea to have a survey, implement a survey before you create your program. And so we've done this with a client. They had a survey of all their employees about their financial wellness, and then they engaged BrightDime, and then 6 months later they had the same survey. So you can measure the feeling and change that your employees have over time. The third item I would say is that BrightDime is creating a financial wellness score for each employee. And so what we're doing for the employer is just saying, let us show you how your overall workforce score is changing over time. All those three items that I just mentioned is just about measuring success and measuring engagement.
No, that's really good. That's really good. I would say from a Benefitfocus perspective, we can measure engagement in a couple of ways. For voluntary offerings, we can obviously measure it through reporting that shows us how many people have enrolled in the benefit. And then at the provider level, so much like what BrightDime is doing, our other providers are also giving reports that show anonymized monthly utilization of the benefit and service at the employer level. So those things are typically, is almost universally provided in this particular space, so people can see that they really are getting the return on investment that they wanted. Okay, got some other questions. So Dave, this one is for you. What rate of utilization do you typically see if BrightDime is offered to employees? So I guess for when offered on a voluntary basis to for the people that enroll, how much are they using it?
So it depends. There are a lot of statistics on how you measure that. First of all, I'm going to give you a little broader answer. When I first got in this business, I didn't quite understand what was considered good and bad engagement. Our engagement numbers are a bit over 30% with the overall workforce, which my understanding is that is very good. But when you talk about once they're signed up for BrightDime, how often they use it, they usually come and check in with BrightDime about, on average, every couple weeks. But here's the tough thing about answering that question. There are some employees that are engaging with BrightDime and BrightDime coaches every day, and those are the employees that usually have significant stress in their life at that point in time. And then there are other employees that may not engage with BrightDime for a month or two, and then maybe they have a life event and they're very engaged. So it's to answer that question with one statistic is tough, but I think we do pretty well in keeping people engaged.
Okay, great. No, good feedback. Got another one. Let's see. Can you talk a bit more about how Benefitfocus or BrightDime helps employers craft the right financial wellness strategy? Yeah, I'll start with this one, Dave, and then kick it over to you. So at Benefitfocus, we have a staff of Benefits Place advisors who are licensed individuals that are subject matter experts in all of the products that we offer through the Benefits Place catalog. So they'll work with employers to understand, who is your workforce? Who are your employees? What do you know their needs to be? If you're not sure what their needs are, let's work together to analyze the data that we have. And then secondly, what do you want to achieve with the financial wellness offering? What are your primary goals? Is it to increase 401k participation? Is it to help with savings, or is it to help lower student loan debt? Is it to increase productivity at work? What's your goal? And the answers to those questions will help us understand what package makes the most sense for you. So the advisor alongside the employer and the broker are going to work together to come to an understanding of what makes the most sense. David, what does your team do when crafting a financial wellness package?
Yeah, actually, Thomas, very similar answer. We meet with the employer to discuss the employee population. You said that too. What's important is what do your specific employees, what are their needs? Because one size does not fit all. It's important to understand what their hot buttons are. For example, the employee needs of a manufacturing firm, I can tell you, are very different than the employee needs of a tech company. And so it's important that we sit down and have an understanding of what the needs are, so we can, first of all, train our coaches to know what those needs are for that particular employer, but also talk about what combination of vendors, if we have BrightDime, and then what other vendors can we bring in to help solve specific needs. And I'll say I think that's actually where Benefitfocus excels, because you have these partnerships with best-in-class vendors. You're able to put together a group of vendors that can meet, I would guess, just about every employee need that's out there.
Okay, great. And our last question is, are there any digital apps or programs employees can use? Dave, I'll let you talk about the BrightDime dashboard and all the great stuff you guys do. in general, from a Benefitfocus perspective, I would talk about the mobile app and seeing as these financial wellness solutions are fully integrated into our platform. If an employer has adopted use of the mobile app, all of that flows seamlessly into the app as well, so employees can engage and interact with whatever benefits they've enrolled in or that they're being offered. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about the dashboard?
Yes, absolutely. So we love that question just because we are a fully digital solution. When an employee signs up for BrightDime, they can access it from their desktop, their iPhone, or any device they have. But everything flows through the dashboard and through the tools. So I often talk about it as a three-legged stool. The first leg is the platform or dashboard where they can have their budgeting, their goal setting, or whatever that may be. The second leg is financial education, but because we have data on the employee's financial situation, we can target that education to try to fill any holes or help educate that employee on where that employee may actually have holes in their financial life. And then the third leg of the stool is coaching, and that's probably where we differentiate ourselves more than anybody else out there is from our coaching. We have live coaches that will chat within the application to the employee whenever they need assistance. So I think we may be one of the only fully digital solutions out there, but it's to us that's a super important direction that the market is taking, and it's important for the employees because that's what they're asking for. They want a digital solution.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So we don't have any additional questions. Before we leave, I would like to mention our One Place event in March, the last part of March 26th through the 28th. This is a great opportunity for employers and our brokers and everyone to come together, and really want to encourage you to attend. We're excited to bring this event back to Charleston, so even more excited for the opportunity to give you a forum for networking, learning, and celebrating. It's always a great event. Like I said, we're really excited to have it back in Charleston, so I hope everyone will do everything they can to attend, and if you're there, I hope to eventually meet you in person. But again, thank you so much for joining, for your interest in this. David, can't thank you enough for participating. And again, if there are any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today and that come up, please feel free to email either David or myself. You'll be receiving a copy of this deck with our information.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, David.
Bye-bye.
Bye.